Welcome to this Tech Talk AI update from Israel for our audience physically and also online. We are running a parallel session, so therefore you can see the camera. So they're out there are the audience for online. My name is Frederikke Krohn, and I'm the program director for ATV's Executive AI Network of the Danish Academy of Technical Science, ATV. Visiting Israel in March, it was clear for the delegation that Israel is the forefront when it comes to foster and implementing new technologies. Especially the development and implementation of AI is a key position of strength, especially thinking of the Israeli ecosystem that includes defense and a very strong culture. Israel is, in my objective, truly a mission-driven country. At ATV, we strive to make Denmark a leading science and engineering region in the world. AI plays an important role in achieving this vision. And this new technology has the potential to leverage Danish businesses and research. Talking about talent, ATV has identified artificial intelligence as an important strategic field of technology for Denmark. AI is a game changer for companies, research, environment, and the whole of society. Therefore, it is essential for our global competitiveness that Denmark educate, ensure talent, and create the prerequisites for innovation within this field. Therefore, we are pleased to offer this AI update from Israel. Our aim is to inspire Danish technology leaders and show why AI needs to be a central part of decision-making and strategy. The next 2 hours, we will set the stage for this very important topic on AI strategically, commercially, and also technically. So today, this Tech Talk is supported by, as you can see at the screen, Willem Fonden and Siemens Fonden, Willem and Siemens Foundation. And then I should change the slide, but I have forgot my pointer. Help! There it comes. Yes, please. Thank you very much. Now, together with me today is a team from ATV having different roles. Mette, which is sitting over there, is facilitating the chat. So for the online audience, we have possibilities to write in English questions along the way, and I hope also that you here physically in Arena in Blocksup ATV that you are able to write down some questions or mark some questions, because we are later running this panel with all the keynote speakers. So please take notes during the sessions. And also Julia Seiden will help us with the technical issues, as usual, and microphones, and also taking some pictures, and maybe some of you will give an interview. We do not know yet what to expect there. Now, Mark, you will be up there. And Mark will manage the online and the parallel session here today, which is not that not easy. So if I go through the program, actually we have some different modules. So first we have facts and figures from ICDK in Tel Aviv, and why is Israel such an AI powerhouse, to understand that. And after that, we have a module where we listen to the delegation members, their key findings on why is it that they are so inspired coming home to Denmark. And some of the participants from the panel will be here, and some will be online also. And topping up of this, we will meet Mobileye together again. The delegation met Mobileye when we went visit Israel. And this is a very important moment for us to share some of the important key findings. And I will introduce the speakers along the way. Finishing off with a panel session, and that is where I would like you to remember to do some notes for questions. So the delegation, the ATV Executive AI Network, spent 4 days in Israel, and certainly we have to say that we had an eye-opening experience. So we had 4 days, 2 locations, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and also we managed to visit and connect with more than 35 peers down there. As I can say that this visit really showed that the reason for success in Israel, which includes the Israeli culture, the army training programs, education systems, Jewish philosophy and ethics, governmental strategy, and some of the main factors that shape Israel's AI ecosystem. And this program couldn't have been managed without the close cooperation with the team in Tel Aviv. And therefore, I'm very happy to present the 2 next speakers. And that is Anne-Christina Lange, Science Attaché at ICDK, Innovation Center Denmark in Tel Aviv, and also her colleague Uriel Dison, a Junior Innovation Officer. And they really made an amazing program for us. I can share it with you. Along some of the visits was a visit at Intel Corporation. They showed us how to manage an internal startup entrepreneurship internally, feeding out lots of AI talents. And I know some of the delegations really got inspired by that. And I have talked about Mobileye. I can talk about the army and all this. You cannot talk about the ecosystem without speaking about defense. And there you are. Thank you very much. And please take us through facts and figures, Christina and Uriel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Frederik, and thank you for this very nice introduction. So I want to start by explaining a bit about the Israeli ecosystem, and as Frederik said, why Israel is so advanced within AI and tech development. Great. Yeah. So just to explain, Uriel and I are working at the Innovation Center Denmark, which is part of the embassy in Denmark, so representing the Danish government and the Danish diplomatic interests in Israel, which a big part of that is to connect Danish stakeholders to the ecosystem here, especially within tech and within AI. So if you can just change the slide. So I want to explain a bit about the Israeli political context for why this nation has turned into a startup nation, as it's being known today. What is the preconditions and the context for what we see happening today? Then I want to show you some numbers and the figures of how extraordinary it is down here and what is actually happening with the ecosystem. And then after that, I want to explain a bit about the Danish-Israeli diplomatic relations within AI so far. So what are we working on and how can we help Danish stakeholders to connect to the Israeli ecosystem in the future? So if you can change to the next slide. So in terms of the political context, I won't delve into the whole historical background of the constitution of Israel, even though it could be relevant, but I don't have time for that. I just want to mention that one of the reasons for Israel to be known as the startup nation is definitely the political context. So Israel is a young nation. The country was established in 1948. It has a culture of immigrants, which matters in terms of the experience of starting your own company. So the country faced a huge immigration, especially from Russia back in the 90s. It was Russian Jews coming because of anti-Semitism on the rise in Russia. They entered Israel with knowledge and talent. They were educated mainly within engineering sciences, and they were also military trained. But Israel is a young nation, so they didn't have a big state apparatus, and they didn't have large companies like we have in Denmark. We have Novo, Carlsberg, and so on. So basically, no institutions to make use of all this talent. So what the Israeli state did was that they established the Israel Innovation Authority, it's called today. It's a national body that support back in the 90s immigrants to start their own company, so that they would make use of all the talent that came into the country. So basically, the Israel Innovation Authority, they give out loans that you only have to pay back if your company is a success. And this is a hugely successful program. I can say that like 60% of people applying to create a startup, they have success. So 60% of the applications are actually receiving money. So it makes worth the effort to apply. And then they made another program that was very well thought out, that the Israeli state, they pay up to 85% of establishing an incubator together with a private international organization. So that's part of the incubation program, which created the whole idea around starting a company, but in a more organized way, so that you would not pay money out of your own pocket, which used to be the the way it worked in Denmark. So you would not be personally responsible if you failed with a startup. So there's also a risk-taking culture supported by the state funding apparatus. And then the third part was that there's a Jewish culture which has a love for knowledge. So if you are sort of anti-Semitism has been on the rise, what is it that you can invest in that you can always take with you? It's knowledge, it's training, it's education. It's definitely not investing in properties or land. So that's also part of the history, the Jewish way of being trained in logical thinking, reading the Torah and so on. That was also something we explored, and a new leg to the story of why Israel is the startup nation. I think that was added throughout the delegation visit. So definitely, as Frederikke said, it's a mission-driven country also, because the last part is that there's a long history of military service in the country. So basically men, they have to serve 3 years in the military. For female, it's 2 years. And at a very young age, the Israelis, they learn to get a lot of responsibility, and they have elite tracks for especially talented people within the tech fields. So there's a whole talent machine in Israel, sort of going through the military. So that's a part of the whole background for the rise of the startup nation, which is a bit different and have different conditions from what we see in Denmark. So next slide. So Israel and the Israeli innovation ecosystem is quite impressive. So the Israeli gross domestic product, the GDP, grew by 8.1% in 2021. The country is an OECD champion of investments in civil R&D. So it's one of the OECD countries that invest the most money in civil R&D. So it's not including the military expenses. The country has 340 VC funds, so there's a lot of money in the country. There's access to more venture capital per capita than any other countries in the world. So what there's basically people are saying in Israel is there's too much money for too little talent, which is an interesting situation. And they have 530 multinationals investing in Israel, but not only investing, they actually established their R&D labs in Israel. And this is actually due to the Israel Innovation Authority establishing the incubator program that I told you about, that foreign companies, they're coming here, opening an incubator together with the Israeli state, mainly funded by the Israeli state, in fact. They get a license to run an incubator for 3 years, and then the state withdraws, and the companies, they stay here. So that's the origin, and it's mainly big American companies investing in Israel, and then they are here to attract talent and to get access to the excellent research environments that are here. Here Israel has more than 6,000 active startups, and Israeli tech companies, they raised $25.5 billion in 2021, which is quite impressive. They have 41 new unicorns in 2021, but we can see now that the first quarter of this year, 8 unicorns came out of Israel already. Israel, as I said, also have excellent research institutions. They have good universities that are ranked at a similar level as the Danish research institutions. And what we see when we get delegations, we also have quite a lot of people from Denmark visiting Israel in terms of AI, looking into basic science. And what they're saying is that Israel has a strong basic science AI community, actually much stronger than what they see in the US, which is also interesting. So Israel is being known as the AI lab of the US. So the US has the commercial aspect, but the solutions are actually being invented in Israel. But then, of course, at the same time, the Israeli universities are very good at commercializing their research, because that's the nature, as I said before, of how this nation was basically built. Still, they have curiosity-driven research. It's still a virtue here, so you can have like people, they say you haven't visited Israel if you haven't met an engineer, an Israeli engineer being in love with his own technology, which means that there are people here that just love the technology and don't have so much awareness about the market opportunities, but it also means that the research coming out of Israel is quite strong. Israel ranks very, very high in terms of receiving grants also from the European Union. So next slide, please. So focusing and zooming in on AI and the place of AI in this ecosystem. AI accounts for 17% of companies, but 37% of all the investment made in the field of tech. So quite a lot of what's going on here is basically going on in AI. Israel is third in the global market share, behind only US and China. And the leading factors, as I said before, is like the level of research done at the universities and the military experience and the need to upscale the defense capabilities, which means that there are specific elite tech units training talent here. Israel is second in number of startups, but clearly first in terms of startups per capita. It's a small country. They only have around 9 million people. So comparing that being just next after the US and China is quite impressive compared to the size of the country. Then Israel has a national initiative for secured intelligence systems. It's a recommendation done by researchers, which is now being evaluated at the governmental level for Israel to establish a national plan for the development of AI. Next slide. So the threat to this whole ecosystem that's so successful is the lack of talent. This is also a problem in Denmark and in many other countries, but it's a problem for Israel in the sense that they created, in a way, a trap for themselves. They have been so successful in attracting all the high American tech companies, and they're then sucking up all the talent and recruiting people, paying high salaries. So in the future, Israel has a problem in terms of who's actually going to create all of these startups if all the engineers are being employed by the big tech companies. And it's something that the country is looking into now, how to circumvent this threat in the future. Next slide. So I just want to say a bit about who we are and how we can help. But I'll try to do this quick because I think I already used quite a lot of time. So next slide. So basically, the Innovation Center is a collaboration between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science. Next slide. And what we do is that we help, as I said before, Danish stakeholders to connect to the Israeli ecosystem. So what we do is that we build ecosystems for innovation. So we help research institutions and R&D companies to create their innovation capability by connecting to the Israeli ecosystem. And we do research promotion and we coordinate different kinds of partnerships. But I would like to give some examples. So next slide. So what we are doing, and basically AI runs through a lot of the projects that we have been part of facilitating. So I just want to highlight a few. We have done a project on hospital innovation within an AI, focusing on specifically radiology, where we created a partnership agreement with Sheba Hospital, the biggest hospital here, and Tel Aviv University. And then we gathered the Danish ecosystem. So we had startups, we had researchers and hospital doctors joining for them to discuss the development of AI in the hospital sector. It was quite interesting because these sectors in Denmark, the doctors, the researchers in the companies, they were not used to talk together. But here in Israel, the ecosystem is more integrated, and the hospital is actually driving innovation as well. They are supporting research in AI, and they're also commercializing it. So it was an interesting project in terms of finding out how can we connect to Israel and what can we learn in terms of organizing the use of AI within the Danish hospitals. Then we have done also a lot within cybersecurity, also focusing on the challenges around using AI for cybersecurity purposes. We have done a booster program, having 10 Danish startups going through a program here, being taught by Tel Aviv University, and now we are organizing a summer school to take place at Hebrew University in the summer for 35 Danish master students. Next slide, please. So why are we doing all of this? And basically what we are hoping to do with this is to create value for the Danish innovation ecosystem. So we try to measure the outputs in terms of how do we do this. So one of the things is, of course, to create partnerships. And with the project I just described to you, an MOU was signed between Sheba Hospital and the North Zealand Hospital. We are facilitating joint proposals to the Horizon Europe program. We saw from the project I mentioned before a submission from Copenhagen University and Tel Aviv University that we are very proud of, that we actually facilitated that. And also we saw that co-publications actually came out around the topic of AI between Copenhagen University and Tel Aviv University. Then we also work at a more structural level. We negotiated to establish an Eureka call together with the Danish Innovation Fund and the authorities, the Israel Innovation Authority here, around AI and quantum science and technology. So enhancing the basic framework conditions for Danish researchers and businesses to do projects together, financed by both Denmark and Israel within AI. And then we have on the educational side a lot of student exchange programs. We facilitate signing of student exchange agreements, but we also bring people here, apply for funding from private foundations to have postdoctoral students, for instance, and PhD students taking parts of their studies at Israeli universities. So basically, that was kind of a very quick overview of the Israeli ecosystem and how we help and try to facilitate and establish connections between Denmark and Israel. So thank you so much.
If I can just add one sentence, it's okay. Just for example, here we're talking about Remilk. I don't know if any of you heard about this company. It's a company that basically creates milk in a lab. And right now we help facilitate moving their operation to Denmark. So it will create 100 new jobs and hopefully more in the future. But just like if we're going back to the numbers, so Israel had 41 unicorns last year, and in general around 90 unicorns. And more than half of them are like outside of Israel, and the vast majority are in the US, and not one in mainland Europe. Only in England there are like one or two. So something that we're trying to do is to help move some of those companies to Europe and specifically to Denmark. So we like help facilitate the move of Remilk that hopefully very soon will become a unicorn. But in general, just to like help companies move and know that they have the opportunity for certain research opportunities in certain fields to move to Denmark specifically. So yeah, this is just want to add that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then we will move to the next session. We will hear about the main questions and aha moments that we take the questions afterwards. Just want to say the most surprising aha moments that the delegation wants to share in this session. And actually, we are so lucky that we have a professor here, Alfred. You can come up to me, please. Okay. And you're professor in innovation and design at Southern University of Denmark. Mm-hmm. And then Kjell Lyngsø will be online, but he is working as a director in Ørsted. So here we have the university side with research. Then we also have the business side. And Andreas, where are you? You're here. Please come up to me. You also was a part of the delegation, and besides you are come up here, please. Besides you are also a startup, your own startup, a founder. You're also the CEO at Ambolt APS, but which I call Ambolt AI. Yes. So the way we're going to do this is that you will stand here, please. Can I have the cards on? There.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we do it like this. Andreas, you will be the first. Kjell, you are online now. Yes.
Yes, yeah, I am.
Yes, you are. Thank you. I know that you have a busy program out there, and happy that you can attend. So now we have 3 different aha moments that you want to share, and some of them are very personal. And you have about 10 minutes each. So Andreas, will you start?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I have 2 aha moments. But just before we get to that, to mention how mind-blowing 41 unicorns actually are. In Denmark last year, we had Luna, we had Pleo, and Tradeshift. That's it. So 41 it's crazy for a country of 8 to 9 million people, especially coming out of the university as an AI entrepreneur myself. I mean, it's completely insane what's going on down there. So for me, that's not an aha moment. It's a mind-blowing thing. And then for one of my aha moments, and I'm sorry that those actually have nothing to do with AI, but more this sort of mindset for the people who are actually building these amazing AI companies. So the first one is about thinking big. And when I'm saying big, I'm actually meaning globally. So for almost any of the companies we met, they are trying to be the largest at whatever they are doing. So they said that a lot, all of them. So later on, we'll meet Mobileye, who said that they are now the largest at crowdsourcing fleet information. And they actually are the largest, so that's pretty cool. But also one night at the Danish ambassador's house, I met with 2 other entrepreneurs who were saying, we will be the largest data platform. Just give us a couple of years. And they were actually pretty far on the journey. But that's sort of the mindset for everyone there. I mean, if you're in the game, you should win it and be the largest at whatever you're doing. So that was, for me, a little bit crazy that even though they were not nearly the largest, they were still with this mindset of we will end up being there. The other, I would say, perhaps even bigger aha moment is the sense of urgency that they have in Israel. So while we were there, actually one of the days there was a terror attack during the day. We didn't hear anything about it, or I mean, it felt really safe being there. But they do have these issues of terror attacks from time to time. And then after a long day of being out, I actually went to the gym at the hotel we were staying at. And it was just me and one local guy, and the news was on, and we saw these terrible images of this attack. And then about 30 minutes later, when I was thinking, we will have a long day again tomorrow, let me just go to my room, get some sleep, he stopped me and said, no, do more. And I looked at him kind of strangely, like, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm going to sleep. He was like, no, you're not done yet. I mean, do a little bit more. I mean, you never know what will happen tomorrow. And that's really, I mean, a mindset that they have. So for me, that was sort of combining these 2 things is a really big aha moment, that in order to actually end up where Israel is at, and it is wildly impressive where they're at, you sort of have to think really, really big. And you have to do things today. So that was it.
Thank you very much. Let's give Andreas a hand. And Kjell, I hope you're writing down or mentally writing down some questions for this to challenge. So why are you laughing, Kjell?
No, it's that writing down questions. Anyway, if I look at what my big moment was on this journey was that when you meet these people, you get this impression that everything is possible. There's no task that is too difficult and not unsolvable. So I was rather impressed by the ability to tackle large problems, divide it down and get them solved, and keep on pushing in order to find solutions to even very advanced problems. And I was wondering during this day, why was it? And we met this guy who was a former next in line at a military company, special unit 8200. And when we heard about how they train these young people that come in this special unit, it gave an idea of what is the culture of the Israeli people. What are they able to do and how can they perform? Because they get trained to, you can do everything if you set your mind to it. So this was very, very impressive. The other thing that also amazed me quite a lot was when you talked with some of these entrepreneurs. Then they, if they didn't have a problem that a solution that could solve your problem, then they would know or have some in their network they could guide you to. And so they're very helpful in any way to see if they can find some other colleague or some in their network that will be able to help you solve your problem. So in all, the ability to take on even the biggest problems and try to solve it, and still be open-minded and help with your problems, that amazed me quite a lot. And it actually got me to start, how can we bring this back and do the same energizing energy into our company? How can we help so that when we set up to do things, that we also in Denmark is able to do it and keep pushing the boundaries? So that's one of the things that I've taken with me home and trying to implement in my team in Ørsted is how can we stress this? How can we use some of the examples they showed on AI, how to push the boundaries? And this is what I'm taking with me from this journey and push in Ørsted.
Thank you. So, Alf,
Yeah.
you also have some takeaways, please.
I have some comments. Obviously, my two esteemed colleagues here already kind of tried to empty the pajazzo in coming with some of the core notions, but I will try to enrich that with a few observations of my own. So I'm a critical innovation scholar. I work with looking to complex emergent technologies and start asking them questions about what happens when these are deployed far into the future. And a couple of observations from that perspective, and from the perspective of the ADD project, Algorithms, Data and Democracy, that I also represent here. My colleague here pointed to this can-do attitude, this delight in collaboration. I've chosen my countryman Risto Siilasmaa's term for this paranoid optimism. That is, there is this distinct sense of urgency, as my colleague here pointed out, but not just urgency in that, oh, it's getting late, but a literal urgency in that if we do not kind of keep our heads up, we may be attacked. There is a distinct fear that drives them. And this is not just urgency from a financial standpoint, it is almost an existential urgency. That, of course, also drives the Unit 8200, which is a fantastic place for developing the new talents that are so direly needed, as Frederikke pointed out. But you also see a similar urge in corporations going to universities, pushing for collaboration, insisting on the importance of acting now for the kind of existential existence of Israel. This is very important. I, however, want to point to two other things that to me were actually more aha moments than those, because I already knew about the Israel's history and was aware of this kind of mindset. The first is the strange intellectualism of what permeates much of Israeli society. You saw our good friend Uriel here. Uriel actually took us home to his parents, where we studied the Talmud and engaged in basically a ritual Talmudic dialogue in which we kind of worked with specific problems that rabbis have worked with for centuries. That this would be a fun thing to do on an afternoon, an evening, would seem odd to most of us because we prefer beer. And instead, we literally work with deep intellectual problems, dialogue, conversation for an extended period of time. And I can say that all of the participants happily engaged in this because it opened our eyes to the fact that in Israel, solving problems, debating things, challenging problems is actually a way of life. A similar thing can be seen in the 8200 unit, in which problem solving is everyday life, particularly for the young. So that's one aha notion. This is a country where intellectualism is actually appreciated, even nurtured. And we might say that, of course, we do this in the Nordics as well, but we can have a conversation about how engaged are we with what's happening at universities? How engaged are we in challenging each other's preconceived notions about, for instance, artificial intelligence? The other more pragmatic thing that I actually didn't realize was an aha moment until last night when I happened to interview a very, very famous and actually very, very successful venture capitalist in Palo Alto. And we got to talking about valuation of novel data streams. And he kind of pointed out that when he tries to find the next big AI company, he looks at, do they have novel ideas about which value streams can be gathered from data? He has worked in this field for about 30 years by now. And you will see how the company Mobileye that we visited, and you would know there's a couple of others that we also visited, have a laser-like focus, not just on what can AI do now, what can AI and the data we're gathering do in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years? Mobileye will put out autonomous taxis all over Tel Aviv, a city where the traffic culture is slightly different from Copenhagen, a more free-form traffic culture, if you will. And here, Mobileye laser focus on what are all the things we can see. And think about that. What can you see from a car? Well, obviously, you can see potholes. That's yesterday's news for Mobileye. You can obviously see traffic signs. That, too, is yesterday's news. But what happens when you start thinking about what can we gather? What kind of data streams can we gather about the city? About how people move, where people gather, where people sit, what people put in their windows, what all things exist that are viewable from a car. This is not something I see Nordic AI companies go deeply into. They have a problem, they solve it, that's it. They hope for an IPO or somebody comes and buys them. Not you, of course. You're deeply into the Israeli mindset already. But in Israel, they are, and I understand that this is part of the Israeli culture more deeply, they literally are looking years into the future, not simply to the next quarterly result, to the next year. And this is why they have 41 unicorns, because they assume business as usual is solved. They're looking for the problems that can be solved next year, the year after, and in 10 years. So those are my two kind of additional observations to the fine observations made by my trip friends here.
Thank you very much. Well, let's give them a hand. Additional to this, to your presentation, could you just give a word, because I know that you did something, action. You did action when you were there, and you did action when you came home, inspired by this Israeli ecosystem. Could you just put short words? I know that Kelly can't be here today because you're actually working on this AI challenge that you brought to Israel. All of the delegation had an AI challenge, personally an AI challenge, working with that and bring it home to solve it. So if you could just say a little bit of word for Kjeld first.
Sorry, I had to turn on the mic.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm actually looking to implement a AI algorithm to detect anomalies and need in a very special area about process industry. And we are on this journey and actually hooked up with some of my fellow trip members from Aalborg University in order to trying to solve this based on the inspiration we get back from the trip in Israel. So we're working on that right now and set up a cooperation with Aalborg University.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Elf?
Well, together with my colleague from Sweden, Marcus Lindahl, we're looking to continue to establishing stronger relationship with the Israeli universities. Marcus is at Uppsala University, and I've discussed potential joint doctoral courses on AI between our universities. I've also kind of taken some of the learnings into collaborations with at least one major corporation that I unfortunately cannot name since I have an NDA with them, but distinctly kind of trying to bring that Israeli paranoid optimism into the Nordic corporate setting.
Thank you. And Andreas?
So one very specific thing we have actually tried to do after, or I have tried to do after coming home, is to do things in a much simpler way. So normally when you think about innovation, you sort of tend to layer complexity, but we've actually tried to take some of that away and see how can we make things simpler, because if we are to hope to be a world leader in anything, I mean, it should be something simple.
Okay, thank you very much. So now there's time for short questions. The three gentlemen will be at the panel session later, so you don't miss the chance. But I would like to ask if there are any just upcoming questions here to elaborate a little bit on that. You're welcome. Yes, please. And could I ask you to say your name and your organization?
Sure.
Thank
My
you.
name is Yan, and I'm come from Quebec Capacity. My question is regarding the regulation for collecting data in public area in Israel. Is that more supported open, or it's very restricted and regulated?
Well, I can start answering, and my colleagues can continue if they have better information. I'm not a lawyer, so do not take my word as law. What I got from the people I just asked about this, they are definitely freer. There is a deeply ingrained notion that you are not to expect full privacy in public spheres. This also comes from paranoid optimism. This is a country where surveillance is far more pervasive than we would accept. There is also an inclination, I will not say who told me this, but basically said, if it's for the betterment of Israeli companies, there will be a way to allow it and accept it. So yes, the legal structure seemed to be more accepting and more liberal than the new EU norms, for instance, for better and worse. I'm personally a strong believer in digital privacy, so I would be very worried to have all of the surveillance freedoms that exist in the Israeli state in Denmark. But on the other hand, I can see the upsides for these kinds of data-intensive corporations. Is this in line with your...
Yeah, I would say so. And also it seems that many of these companies handle this by hiring a group of lawyers and just say, we have some lawyers looking into it. So, so that's at least how they...
I think every company does that.
Yeah, exactly.
Just hire a bunch of lawyers, they'll sort it out.
Birker Schneider, Shamai. I know technology is very important in making unicorns, but I also have the observation when I have been working with Israeli companies that they are more aggressive in business. Is that an observation that you can support, that they are a lot more aggressive in business than we gentle-going Danes are?
if I start again, and you please do continue, I have to say, as a Finn, because I am Finnish by birth, gentle going isn't the first word we use to describe you in business. It's not one of the first 10 words. Danes are considered hard bastards in business by most of the other Nordic countries and European countries. What I believe is that there is a certain discretion, might be a better word, in not wanting to push for a continuously higher valuation, whereas Israelis are happy to push for whatever the Americans are prepared to pay. So I don't think it's simply they are more aggressive. I think that the American mindset might be slightly more prevalent.
Yeah, so I will actually answer it with a story because we met with a company called Tribute, a pretty small company. They're gathering a quite interesting database of who collaborates with who, basically within research. And someone from the delegation asked, what would you expect from us? And he was pretty honest and said, well, I'm going to give you the Israeli answer, money. I mean, that's what I'm here for, money and business. I would say, yeah, they are very straightforward with this is a business and we're here for the money.
Yes. Any, please, Sander.
I'm Sandeep Sander. Thank you indeed for your excellent presentations. Whenever there is a change or transformation, there's also an opportunity. And I think that the EU is setting up some changes in terms of new regulations, for example, for compliance and for data security and so on. How do you see this opportunity for collaboration between Israeli companies and companies in Denmark and the Nordics?
Well, hopefully they have some lawyers. No, they perhaps a bit more straight answer. At least one thing I think the EU is doing a little bit, and some of it is pretty good and some of it not so much, is sort of closing in on itself because, to be honest, we are still a pretty small, quite fragmented market. So I think what we will see is more local players trying to sort of handle local regulations and so on in some of the EU countries, while, for instance, the Israeli companies might just look more to the US. We actually also met another company who said these kind of things we cannot sell in Europe, so we just sell them in the US. So, exactly.
But every company we met was very open for collaboration with European companies, was very keen on finding pathways for this, and linking to some other conversations I've had with data security companies, their data security skills are highly, highly developed. Their understanding of how to run data-driven business is, I would say, not just on par, but better than the average Nordic company. And I do believe that there is a lot of things we can learn from there. But this needs to be done in a way in which we actually appreciate each other's differences. I wouldn't perhaps start from the most privacy invasive parts, but data security, for instance, is something where there's definite collaboration potential, because without going into specifics, there are surprisingly many Danish companies that are not secure with their data at the moment, and where it is only a matter of time until the criminal gangs who define various forms of crack criminality, as I sometimes call it, we will need help from our Israeli friends.
Yes.
We haven't let Kjell in really, so.
Sorry? Kelly's there, yes.
Yeah. Do you want to
Yeah,
come
I'm still
in? Because
I totally agree with you, Alf, that they are very much into cooperation. And I think on the security side, they are very strong where we can learn a lot from them. And I think, as Alf also mentioned, is that we are going to be challenged in this area for the coming years and how we are going to secure our businesses. So this is very much an area where we can learn a lot from the Israelis.
First of all, thank you for having me here. I must say that I really enjoyed the discussion earlier with Andrea, Alf, and Kill. And it was really interesting to hear the insights you had from Israel. And today I'm going to talk to you about the story of Mobileye. And I think many of these insights, although I haven't heard them prior from the group, but I think my presentation kind of connects the dots of the different insights and aha moments that you mentioned. So let's start from the beginning, and let's start from the first slide. So, as Andrea talked about, Israeli companies try to solve big problems. And Mobileye, when it was founded about 20 years ago, it was focused on a very common problem that all of us are aware of, and that is car accidents. So you have today more than 1.3 million people dying each year from car accidents. And nearly half of them are the vulnerable road users. It's pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists. And when you look deeper into the problem, you understand that the main reason for this problem is us. 93% of accidents happen because of the human factor, the human driver. We are not driving safe enough. We're making mistakes. We're not paying attention. We're talking to the kids behind us. We're dreaming. We're sleeping. We might have been drinking. So there are many reasons why these accidents happen. And when you look even deeper to the problem, you understand that 80% of accidents happen because of 3 seconds of the driver not paying attention before an accident. And exactly in these 3 seconds, Mobileye comes in. And in the next slide, you would see that Mobileye was focused on this problem, and it started with a chip and a camera sitting in a vehicle on the front windshield using AI and computer vision and analyzing the road and understanding everything in the road. So as you can see in the video, we can detect vehicles, we can detect pedestrians on the sidewalk, we can detect the traffic signs and their color, the traffic light, the green area or the green carpet, that the free space where the vehicle could diverge to if it needs. So based on all these visual cues and semantics based on a single camera, we were able to give the driver a warning in these 3 seconds and prevent accidents. So it started with preventing accidents with a warning, and accidents with the vehicle in front, an accident of diverting to the lane in the side, and it developed with the years to more active features like automatic emergency braking, and that the vehicle sees a danger and it brakes automatically. So if you're driving a new vehicle, and today every new vehicle in Europe as of 2022 has to have that type of systems, automatic emergency braking and lane keeping assist. So the wheel brings you back to the middle of the lane. And from that onwards, it goes all the way to fully autonomous vehicles. So next slide, please. So just going further to the story of Mobileye. So it was founded in 1999 by 2 co-founders, Professor Amnon Shashua and Mr. Ziv Aviram. And this is, again, something that is very common to the Israeli ecosystem. It's a combination of a professor for computer vision, a professor from the academy, and Mr. Ziv Aviram, which was a business person. He was CEO of a couple of companies. And this kind of coalition between business and academia has brought up this company that was focused on this problem. It was 6 years of R&D, or 7 years of R&D until 2006. That's the first year that the company sold a product. And it was to one of the car manufacturers. In 2012, we already sold 1 million chips of Mobileye to be embedded in vehicles. In 2014, Mobileye got public on the New York Stock Exchange, the IPO. It was the largest ever IPO of an Israeli company. And in 2017, Mobileye was acquired by Intel for $15.3 billion US dollar. So that's the biggest acquisition of an Israeli company ever. Later on in 2020, Mobileye acquires Moveit. So that's an app for getting to point A to point B using public transportation. And as mentioned, we're going all the way to fully autonomous vehicles provided and serviced by Mobileye in this year in Tel Aviv. And we're also going to do that in Munich, and later on that will expand. Next slide, please. So just a couple of numbers. In 1999, there were 5 employees. Today, there are 3,000 and counting. Just to show you the quick growth, I joined Mobileye about 6 years ago, and we were about 400 or 500 employees, and see the growth in just 6 years. And today, Mobileye is a global company. The headquarters is in Jerusalem, but there are offices all around the world. And as mentioned, the problem that Mobileye was trying to solve is not a specific problem for Israel. That's not interesting. Israel is a small country with big problems, but we're looking for the global problem. And this is a global problem, and therefore our market is global. And going back to the question about regulation and privacy, yes, there might be different appetite for privacy in Israel, but our market is not Israel. The market is global, and therefore when we are looking at privacy, we're looking at GDPR and European regulation and American regulation, and that is, I could say, very much similar to other Israeli companies. Next slide, please. So a few more numbers. Mobileye has grown into a place that today over 1 million vehicles are equipped with a Mobileye chip and a Mobileye camera. And as you can see in the graph below, it's growing exponentially. And we have over 30 car models that are using Mobileye with $1.4 billion revenue in 2021. Next slide, please. As you can see, we're working with almost all of the OEMs. So some of you might not have heard about Mobileye before visiting Israel, but if you own a VW or a BMW or a Mazda or Audi, most probably you have a Mobileye inside your vehicle. Next slide, please. And now, today, when we look at Mobileye's business, there are 3 pillars of that business. The first one is the ADAS. The ADAS, the Advanced Driver Assistance System, these are the forward-facing camera that is saving lives, reducing accidents, automatic emergency braking. That's the bread and butter of Mobileye. That's the original problem Mobileye was going to solve. That's the first pillar. Then we have autonomous driving or autonomous vehicles. And here Mobileye is going all the way to fully autonomous service that is doing all the different stacks. So we can provide the full service of taking an app, pressing, getting an autonomous vehicle or a robotaxi. But we can also provide different layers of the service, whether it's just the sensors or the sensors and the whole kit, or a vehicle as a service, or the full mobility as a service. And the third pillar is the data services, which is quite new to Mobileye. It's something that is true for the last 5 years. And I'll talk about more the data and why it's essential for an autonomous vehicle to have the highest definition maps with data collected from the crowd, and to have and using this data also for other services beyond automotive. So taking this to smart cities, taking this to planning of roads, to managing of roads, and so on. And in the next slides, I'm going to talk about each one of these layers. So going back to the problem, let's start with this video. What you see here is a cabin of a very large vehicle. Okay, this is taken from the UK, so it's driven on the wrong side of the road. Okay, as you see, looking in the mirror, there is no problem. But actually, all these cyclists that are standing here are standing in the blind spot of this vehicle. And if a driver would turn now left, he would not see all these pedestrians and cyclists. And in the next slide, you could see that Mobileye is all the time looking for the problems in driving and trying to solve these problems. So it started with a forward-facing camera. Now we have a solution that's called Turn Assist that covers the blind spots of large vehicles like buses and trucks and surveys these places and gives warning to drivers in order to reduce these type of accidents. So it's passenger vehicles, it's trucks and buses, and it's many other types of vehicles, all in order to reduce car accidents. Now, this problem, you can see that this problem is more emerging in places where you have less a history of driving, of cyclist driving. So in London, as an example, where this was newly introduced in the last decade, cycling, and the interaction between cyclists and large vehicles such as trucks and buses create these types of accidents. And therefore, Mobileye has come up with this solution based, again, the same chip, the same AI to solve this. Next slide, please. So that was the ADAS. Now, let's talk about autonomous driving. So when we think of an autonomous driving, it's such a big problem. It's like putting a man on the moon. And it has three different pillars or three different building blocks. One is the sensing, is the perception of what's happening around the vehicle. It's understanding and sensing what are the traffic signs, what are the clues, where are people driving, what are the other actors on the road are doing. So that is based on Mobileye's vision sensors and understanding the whole surrounding of the vehicle. So for an autonomous vehicle, we put around 12 different cameras around the vehicle, but we also fuse other sensors like radars and lidars. And that's the sensing part. And then we have the planning. The planning is the actual decision-making of how do I act in every millisecond based on all the information I've received from the sensing, from the road. And how do I negotiate with the different actors on the road, like the cyclists and pedestrians and other drivers, and make the decision how to maneuver the vehicle. And then there is the easiest part of all, which is the acting. It's executing the planning in the control of the vehicle, and the brakes and the gas and the wheel, and doing all this combination of the three. That's what's needed to put an autonomous vehicle on the road. Beyond that, of course, we have a safety layer that we call responsible sensitive safety model that makes sure that these vehicles drive in a safe manner. And in the next slides, we're going to see a couple of videos of how this happens. Okay, this is Paris, and you can see the maneuver that this vehicle is trying to do. Okay, what this vehicle has done is what's called an unprotected left turn. So you want to turn left, and you have cyclists and you have vehicles trying to cross you. Now, think how difficult this is for a human driver, and you can see how this vehicle needs to interact and solve this problem. And it's at the end, it's a mathematical problem of how do you interact and make the safe decisions to cross this road. And one of the biggest challenges with autonomous vehicle is to combine safety, make sure you do not do accidents, and nobody is going to accept vehicles, autonomous vehicles or robots making the same level of accidents like humans. So we have to be an order of magnitude much more safer than human drive. But you also can't be too safe because the vehicle has to be comfortable. We don't want the vehicle to drive too slow or too cautious in a way that is more cautious than a human driver and just too slow to merge into real-time traffic. As mentioned, Israel is our playground for autonomous driving. And driving in Israel, we talked about Tel Aviv, but Jerusalem is not easier. People just don't follow rules. And you have to teach this autonomous vehicle to be assertive. You could say aggressive. Assertive is the polite version of aggressive. But these vehicles have to go out in the roads and in the roads of Israel. And when you go out to drive in Israel, you have to be very assertive. Otherwise, stay at home, because if you want to merge into traffic, you have to push a bit. Otherwise, nobody would let you merge into the next lane. So we need to teach these vehicles to merge in all different traffic situations. So that was Paris. In the next slide, you would see Tokyo, where here the challenge is a lot of pedestrians just crossing the road. And you can see how the vehicle is acting towards this real life scenario of pedestrians and cyclists taking over. And it needs to maneuver in a safe but comfortable way. So not being too cautious and merging into real traffic. And as you would see in the next slide, Mobileye is taking this ability to put an autonomous vehicle, and it's not kind of bordering it or ring fencing it to only a very specific area of the world, but we're taking this to the max and saying we're going to put an autonomous vehicle anywhere in the world. So it's not only where you have very polite drivers or the streets are pedestrian free, but it's going to be on real traffic. In the last years, we've showed that we can put an autonomous vehicle in Israel, in Detroit, in New York City, in Paris, in Munich, in Tokyo, and many more to come. By the way, if we're talking about regulation, then we're launching our autonomous vehicles in two places, Munich and Tel Aviv. The reason why we're doing that there is Tel Aviv is our home, but also the regulation is very advanced, allowing autonomous drivers to drive in Israel. If you think of traditional traffic laws, you'll have to have two hands on the wheel, eyes on the wheel. The driver, the human driver, is responsible, and you have to change all that in order to put an autonomous vehicle. And the same goes for Germany. Germany is very advanced with the regulation for autonomous vehicles, and this is one of the reasons. Actually, Germany is the most advanced. It just passed a new regulation for that, and this is the reason why Germany is also in the top place for putting an autonomous vehicle. Next slide, please. So looking into the future, so in 2017, we launched our ADAS, premium ADAS, where the ADAS or the driver, the collision avoidance systems are also more advanced than just reducing accidents, but they allow to take hands off the wheel. 2021, 2022, and 2023, we're launching robotaxi services, like I mentioned, in Munich and Tel Aviv. And looking into 2025, we're looking also in consumer vehicle autonomous driving. So vehicle owned by private individuals that will have autonomous systems. And in order to make that available, we'll have to drive down costs of all the systems in order for that to be in a cost-effective price that individuals could purchase. Next slide, please. So going to the last pillar of data, why do we need data? Why is Mobileye, a company that is looking to reduce accidents, why is it even interested in data? And the reason for that is, as I mentioned before, nobody's going to accept an autonomous vehicle making accidents. And in order to do that, we have to have a lot of information to reduce the risk of an accident. So that information is coming from the sensing. So understanding in real time the location of all the different road users, the vehicles, the pedestrians, and so on. But you also need to have information beyond the sensing range of the cameras and the radars, and that information can only be provided by a digital map. So it's a high definition map that tells you that in 100 meters you're going to have a very sharp turn and you need to reduce your speed now. And in 200 meters you want to exit the road or the highway, so you need to start maneuvering now. And Mobileye is creating that high definition map, and the way we're doing that is using crowdsourced. So if you move to the next slide, you would see that we have millions of vehicles on the road using our forward-facing camera. And these vehicles have the ability to detect all the road and upload this data to the cloud. So the data about the traffic signs, about the speed limits, it's aggregating all this data, sending it to the cloud. And in the cloud, we're creating GIS layers and map layers. And later on, all these GIS layers could be downloaded back to the vehicle for an autonomous vehicle to localize itself. So in the next slide, you could see how this is being used. So Mobileye is creating these maps, and now Volkswagen in the last year has launched Travel Assist 2.5, and in the next video you would see how this is put into implication. So this Volkswagen vehicle needs to keep the right lane. It's an easy task when you have lane marks, like in this video here. And here we overlay the map from the blue lines, and their yellow lines are from the map that Mobileye has. And the blue line is the center of the lane averaged from all the previous drives that were done. So until now you have 2 lanes, but very soon in the video, you would see that you have a road with just 1 lane, but the road is a 2-way road. And you need to put the vehicle exactly and guide it along the line, telling it where to position itself, and to understand that in this specific situation, it's not a 1-way road, but it's a 2-way road, and it needs to take the right side of the road. So this is only available through the large amount of information that we're collecting of where exactly the vehicles are positioning themselves in the drive and in these lanes. Now, of course, everything has to be GDPR compliant, so it's with a consent, it's non-private data, it's data about the road. And in the next slide, so this was the implications for autonomous driving, and we're collecting millions of kilometers all around Europe of the road. And in the next slide, you would see that we're taking this type of data and not only using it for the autonomous driving, which is the main focus of Mobileye, but we're also detecting potholes on the road. And in the next slide, you would see that we are taking all this information of what we see from the forward-facing camera, and we can use it for multiple use cases, such as maintaining the road assets, maintaining the potholes and the road markings and repainting them, but also understanding what's happening in real-time traffic. What are the common speeds and where is congestion is going to happen? But also mobility planning of understanding where are the places where are most prone to an accident. Where do people get a warning before an accident? And where does this happen more? Or where are people speeding more than the average? And all these things could be very helpful to city planners to reduce the risk and optimize the use of the road. So the next slide, this is to sum up everything that we've done, from avoiding accident using a forward-facing camera, going all the way to using that camera and serving autonomous vehicles, and taking it to data centers that could help the management of cities all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Udi. Thank you for a great presentation with lots of facts and figures. I might think there could be some questions for you. Mette, no questions on the online part?
No, I haven't gotten any questions yet, but please type in your question in the chat and I'll make sure to deliver it.
That's good. And here we have a question, and that is from Biwa. And please mention your name again and your company, and then so Udi knows who is talking.
Birger Schneider, Shamai Company. My question is that you use a lot of cameras, but sometimes weather conditions are not very visible. So how are you dealing with conditions like fog and heavy rain?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So what we have is redundancy systems, and we call it true redundancy, where we have a system of vision sensors, which that's the main sensor that we use. But we also have information coming from radars that are less sensitive to weather conditions, that can detect objects like vehicles and cyclists and pedestrians. And we also have the map. So if you think of very bad weather condition and an application like Lane Keep Assist that tells you where you need, that if you drift from the lane, it takes you back. So this application needs to detect the lane markings and detect your position as a vehicle. And when you drift, it needs to bring you back. Now, if there is bad rain or the road is even flooded, you cannot detect the lanes, right? So how can you bring the vehicle back? But for that, we have the map. So the map information of exactly where the lanes are, and the vehicle is localized to the road in a 10 centimeter accuracy, so it knows exactly where the lane should be from previous rides that recorded that lane when it was sunny and good weather. And now that feature could also work when the weather is really bad.
Thank you. And here we have a question.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Gil Hausman. I am doing a master's in cognitive science at the University of Copenhagen. And I was wondering, you talked a lot about the data collection and aggregation at the end. Are you doing any types of collaborations with like the likes of Waze, especially in a country like Israel? Or do you more see them as in a competitive manner?
So we do collaborations. Yes. We don't. Waze has a different kind of model. So Waze is built on a model of they do not commercialize the data, but rather they don't buy and sell data, but rather collect data from the crowdsource and do data barters with, let's say, cities, where they provide information about blockages. The city would provide information about blockages, and Waze would provide information about traffic situation. So yes, we do have collaborations, but again, we're a global company. It's easy to collaborate with Israeli companies because of the very tight network. And when I needed to talk to somebody at Waze, it ended up to be the person who sat next to me at school and in high school. But we're also collaborating with global companies.
Okay, thank you. And next question, please. Yes.
My name is Yan Yang, come from Quebec Capacity. My question is that can you name several points that you think you will make your success in the business? Because I'm not a technician, but I think the technical framework that you present is not in a way totally unique. Other companies are also doing the same kind of design, but you make a huge success. If you can name some factors, what that will be?
Yeah. So one of the key, one of the key differentiators of Mobileye in this space is the fact that Mobileye has been working for more than 2 decades and leading the world of safety and collision avoidance. And we're taking all that data and accumulative scenarios of driving and reducing accidents and taking that into a world of autonomous driving. Now, if you look at other players in autonomous driving, most of them do not have, either they do just autonomous driving for robo-taxi services, like Waymo from Google do that, and so on. And they are very focused on a robo-taxi service, and a robo-taxi has very expensive sensors. It has a LiDAR and radar, and it's not something that you can really commercialize apart from a taxi service. But Mobileye has the track record and all the technologies and data that is taken from the ADAS, and we can bring it to autonomous driving from the one hand. And everything that we develop towards autonomous driving, today autonomous driving is still not a business, okay? It's very new, and it's the edge of technology and very innovative, but it's still not a business with huge revenues. But the developments that we're doing for autonomous driving, we can take back to our main business of ADAS, like the map that I talked about, the crowdsourced map, and make it not just a science project or technologies that we develop for a business that will be in 7 years in time, but we can take them back to the ADAS and kind of commercialize them today. So it's having the two fruits of one in autonomous driving, but the stronger fruits in ADAS that can help us develop forward.
Thank you very much. So, Uri, I will ask you to stay, and now we will do the panel. So
Sure.
please, could I ask Alf and Andreas to come up here, and also Kel to be online, and Uriel, sorry, from ICDK. If I could have these pictures up, Mark, if possible, and then we will do the panel debate. So, yes, excellent. So actually, now we had a lot of questions, but I would like to for you to be able to question something. So maybe you have some curious questions about each other listening to these keynotes. So Udi, what are you most curious about hearing these keynotes and about Denmark and the culture?
Yeah, so I think part of these kind of road trips to Israel is to think of what you can take back and how you can implement it back home. And I think many of the things that were mentioned, part of them are structural, but part of them are a mindset. So as you mentioned, in Israel, you have this paranoid optimism and you have the sense of urgency. And one of the reasons is in Israel, when you walk around, you see problems all around you. You see traffic and you see potholes and you see buses and public transportation not coming on time, and therefore you try to solve problems. I can tell you that when I travel to places like Denmark or Switzerland or places in Europe, everything, let's talk about Switzerland, which I know better. Everything looks perfect, and it gives you a very calm feeling that nothing is urgent. You can go to the park, play football, drink a beer. So I'm curious, how do you think of taking these different mindsets and what you can take from these takeaways and bring back home?
I can actually kind of continue from there, because I've worked with innovation in quite a number of countries. And the one thing that fascinates me is that whilst, of course, we were on the trip, we were very much asking questions of our Israeli hosts about how can you do that? How can you do this? How can you achieve 41 unicorns? A lot of the Israelis I talked to were asking, how can you make society work that smoothly? How can you sort that out so well? And this gels with my kind of overall experience. If you go to China, they kind of look to the US for inspiration. If you go to the US, they go look to China for inspiration. Everyone is looking someplace else. And everyone is convinced that right here, we're not good enough. The single country where I've worked with innovation issues that did not think like this, or at least didn't state this, was North Korea, because there it's illegal and they'll shoot you if you do. But besides that, every other country is jealous of all other countries. It's quite fascinating, actually.
Okay. So, Kjell, do you have any questions?
You're muted.
Kjell is muted.
Sorry, I'm actually rather interesting to see that Mobileye is so focused on their core business and expands rather slow in order to make sure that their basic is in place before they move on. For instance, to pothole detection and so on. Is this a certain strategy from your side?
So I would say that the strategy is look at the places where you can solve problems, bring value, and create a business. So the ADAS, it was very clear that's very immediate on one side. The problem is very clear, and you can create a business, because if you solve traffic accident, for sure someone could pay for that. But still, it takes a lot of time. It took 7 years until we were able to sell anything. And part for that is R&D time, and also part of it is market acceptance. It's not like the OEMs were running to us, or the car manufacturers were running to buy safety. And the same goes with the other applications. So we're looking to see the ADAS was clear, and then came the autonomous driving and that trend. And once we created the map for autonomous driving, we got this interest from cities and other stakeholders that are looking for that data because they know it brings them value. Taking it to a full-scale business does still take time. So it is building. At the moment, Mobileye is. I mean, the first year of Mobileye were kind of based on investment. So we have 7 years of R&D, no revenues, and everything is based on external investment. Today, all the new innovation is based on the revenues that are coming from the big business of ADAS and the main business of Mobileye.
Could I sort of continue on that? Because there was an implication there that this was a short-term thing or a long period, which it of course isn't. We're just gotten so tricked by everything that's happened during the last years, so 10 years seems like an eternity. But I mean, I'm sort of also worried in a positive sense about the long-term aspects of this. So I was never a great driver. I don't own a car at the moment, but I happened to actually rent a car with your system on it, which was wonderful because I could drive very safely and I realized just how lazy a driver it turned me into. I was just, okay, I can handle anything now, including driving in Africa, which was quite tricky. So what kind of thinking do you think on the long-term cognitive aspect of this? We have a colleague here in the cognitive sciences. What happens when we've had your excellent systems for 30 years? Will anyone know how to actually drive anymore? Will human beings have, if they need it, the skills to actually drive for help? Or will, if the systems go down, we just go, I have no idea what to do with this metal hunk?
It's a great question, and I'll answer with a funny story. When there was the IPO, when Intel bought Mobileye, we were invited to come to the Ministry of Finance in Israel and to present what we've done and so on. And I used to work in the Ministry of Finance in Israel, so I knew everybody. So I was also coming with the CEO of Mobileye. And we were sitting there and talking to the minister and presenting Mobileye. And then one of the advisors of Mobileye, the minister came in, a young person, and Israel is not very formalistic and not very polite, so he was started talking and said, "Oh, Mobileye, of course I know this company. That's the system that allows you to text while you're driving," because it's so safe that he can text, and if there is an accident, he would get a beep. So yes, it does change driving behavior. That's true. What we see with professional drivers like fleet drivers, logistics fleet, that they become safer drivers. They start keeping the right distance. They diverge less. They hear the beeps and they hear the warnings from the system, and that they drive safer. It is true that if you go to more autonomous driving, then you lose the capabilities. I was in the Israeli army. We learned how to navigate using a map, using the stars, and so on. Today, when you have Waze and you have Google, I think that these kind of things are getting lost, the ability to navigate. But there's also a question: is driving such an important capabilities in 20 years' time?
Thank you. Now, Uriel, you talked about talent and that this challenge that we don't have enough talent in this area. And I would like to address this a little bit. Since we are so lucky to have a young startup who is actually doing something about it, making a Danish championship in AI and enforcing the students to look for this field of area and being so excited that they will do their own startup. So maybe you just, Andreas, could just give some short words on what was it that you saw, why did you take this initiative, and how did you start your own company, and what do you do for having this talent? I'm a little bit curious why you did it, because I think you are then sucking out the students with this special competences.
So actually, well, the main reason why we decided to host the competition is I'm from computer science myself, so I know what it's like to be a programmer trying to build machine learning. And actually, when we started the company, we decided to start it because someone from the industry, or everyone from the industry to be specific, told us AI will never be commercial. You cannot go into the industry and work with AI. I mean, you simply cannot sell it to customers. And as someone who was really passionate about building intelligent systems, this sucked really, really much. So that's why we started the company. And of course, now everyone is talking about how you really need AI talent and how we'll, at least in Denmark alone, need 30 to 80,000 people by 2030. So that's, I mean, so much talent, right? And to be honest, the main reason why we decided to host the competition, the Danish National Championship in AI with all of the universities now, is sort of just a way of giving back, because now we have shown that AI can be used in the industry. Everyone talks about how AI talent is sort of like the new rock stars. So for a while we had rock stars, then we had tech stars, and now we'll have AI stars. And at least that's something that I believe in. So that's our way of giving back to the students and say we're now at a point where we should have a championship in this.
Yes, and actually ATV are very proud of being a sponsor and supportive to this initiative. It's very important. Now we are heading for the end, but we have opportunities for a couple of more questions. And I know Biwa would like to say something. And addressing the panel, please.
Yeah, Birger Schneider. I'm curious about the training issue. In AI, training of data is very essential. And I would like to ask Uri about training of cars in different driving cultures. I imagine that driving in Israel is very different from driving in Denmark and very different from driving in other places of the world. Do you optimize your systems for specific areas, or do you have the same system that will work throughout the world? Or how are you getting about the different driving cultures? You have a lot of data. So my question is relating to how you train your systems to optimize them in the best manner.
Yes. So again, we plan to deploy autonomous vehicles everywhere. So take Europe, for example, we need to accommodate a vehicle that can drive from Italy all the way up through Switzerland, Germany, and all the way up to Denmark, and just think of the different driving cultures in these different countries. So we train the system in all these different scenarios. So we train the system in Jerusalem, but we also do that in Detroit, and we do that in different countries. And we do also have different driving modes. We have more aggressive driving mode or more assertive for places like Israel. And we have more comfortable driving modes. So the quick answer is we have adaptability to the driving manner and the driving scenario that we see around us.
Up a little bit on that, because I'm very impressed with what you're doing, very impressed with the examples we got and your stories here, but at the same time I'm a critical scholar. So my question starts to become, you're deploying it all over the world. I know you have this global mindset, which is wonderful. You have a fantastic product, but you also are gathering tons of data, which of course makes your cars better, makes your cars more prevalent in traffic, makes your data better, and there is a spiral here, which you of course love. I would love it as well if I owned it. But isn't there a risk, and could you kind of say a few words about the risk, that you become the Google of traffic, the one company who controls the traffic data, and it's basically you who decide who goes where, who finds what? Because there's been a lot of criticism against the big tech companies and their kind of walled garden approach to their data.
Yeah, so I think specifically, if you think about that, the way Mobileye operated in all these years is serving all the car manufacturers and not becoming a car manufacturer itself. So Google has its autonomous driving service, Waymo, and I think if you would ask kind of 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the traditional car manufacturers, the European ones, when will there be autonomous vehicles? When will there be electrical vehicles? I would say in 30, 40 years. But then came all the Googles and the Tesla and the Silicon Valley companies and made the disruption. And today the car manufacturers are looking for the partners to kind of leverage and be on par with the Silicon Valley companies. And Mobileye is in the 20 years it's been on the ground. It's working with the traditional car manufacturers, selling them sensors and data and maps in order for them to have the best vehicles on the road. So currently Mobileye's model is not keeping it for one car manufacturer, but rather making it democratized and available for all.
Democratizing data, that is a huge word. And
I would start with democratizing safety.
Yeah, democratizing safety, but that is a better vision, maybe. Yes, and now one last question here, because now we are ending up. Lovely questions, all of you, for the audience and also for the online. So, Uriel Deason, I know that you have spent a week together with the delegation, and I got a good insight in the Danes' way of working and being and behaving, and we have also worked a lot on the program and things, and I would love you to end up this with a good advice from you. So what should the Danes do in order to speed up talent attraction, to speed up collaboration with Israel? So what do you advise us to do? So you will have the final sum up, please.
Okay, thank you so much. So I didn't plan exactly the right answer for this, but thinking about it now, I think it's divided to a few things. So first of all, Israelis are very open for collaboration and are very curious people in general. And I think daring just like to, if anyone that is in this room today, sorry to unmute my WhatsApp, anyone in this room today like is more than welcome to like, first of all, come to us and speak with us about their needs and things that maybe they're interested to do in Israel, and we can connect them to the right people. Most Israelis would be more than happy, even if they don't make anything out of it, just like to meet you guys. I think the 35 speakers that we had during the ATV delegation, none of them got any money or anything for it. They completely just wanted to, share their knowledge. So just be open, come to us, tell us your needs, and we'll try to connect you to the right people and hopefully create collaborations from it. I think like talent is something that we discussed a little bit today, and both in Denmark and in Israel, we need more talent, and we need to, like maybe in Denmark also to dare more and to be a bit more, quick and pivot more, but we can discuss it another time. But about talent development, I want to say something. We had during the delegation a guy called Uriel Schechter that he came and joined us for the whole delegation. He now is working in a very new government initiative in Israel that they're investing hundreds of millions of shekels, so hundreds of millions of krona, into it, which basically is to bring more people from the ultra-Orthodox and from the Arab community into the high-tech industry. So I'll just give some numbers. Arabs in Israel make 20% of the population, but they're only 3% of the high-tech industry. And ultra-Orthodox Jews make around 8-9% of the population, and they're only 1.6% of the high-tech industry. And in both populations, there are like huge potential that is basically almost 30% of the country. And what Uriel is doing now is strategizing how to bring these population into the high-tech industry in a few months period. And we know that it's possible. The reason that we know that it's possible is because all of our people in the army, they study. I also went to the intelligence, like we study for 4 months, 5 months, and then they just throw us into doing like very extreme high-tech, scenarios and basically building solutions for security reasons. But what we're seeing is that it's possible to teach people in a few months and to get them excited and to get them into the startup mindset. So what I would want to do as working for the Danish Foreign Ministry is to find more collaborations, and maybe with you guys as well, and with the people that are listening, to bring more talent to Israel, or to bring experts from Israel to teach that way in Denmark, or to find just a way to work together and create new talent, even if the people never study anything technical before. So this is just something that I don't know if I'm sure some of you guys know about the kibbutz movement, like the kibbutz that in the past a lot of people from Denmark especially came to Israel to work in the fields. So I kind of want to create, and this is like a secret, but like hopefully for 2023 I want to create some sort of a program called Kibbutz 2.0, and to bring people to work in the high-tech industry in Israel from Denmark, and to learn the skills to bring it back to Denmark and to create more of these collaborations. Because if we're talking about AI, I think Denmark is the leading country in AI. 24% of all startups are also dealing with AI, and same in Israel. And there is so much potential to bring more connection between Israel and Denmark. So we're open for business. Anyone can reach out to me. So that's it.
This is why I love this guy. And now we are finishing up. But I think there still would be a big issue that we have to learn in Denmark, and that is how we're becoming mission-driven as the Israeli system. So in Denmark, we are talking about having business, universities, and government together in a triangle. But what we learned, as I mentioned in my introduction, is that adding up with defense, adding up with the culture, the strong culture, of course, we cannot do the same as you have done for ages and thousands of years, but we have to find a mission, because we have to be mission-driven more than we do today. And this is one of the key learnings, and lots of more talk we could do about this, how to become a mission-driven country as the Israeli one. So with this word, I would love to thank very much to the online audience, and of course to all the audience here, and thank you for the questions. And finished but not at least, thank you very, very much to the keynote speakers. I would love to, if we could, bring forward your slides, and that is special use Uriel and Udi, if it's possible. And then I will send a short thank you mail with some more information. And of course, as I also mentioned in the introduction, that we have lots of interests in AI and defined AI as a very important task to do in the Danish Academy of Technical Science. And we will keep on, and you can find all the upcoming events on our home site. So could we have the last slide for Mark coming up there? So there it was. That was the end. And now it's informal networking outside if you would like to. Otherwise, you think we should do a big hand for all the keynote speakers and all of that. Thank you so much.